All right, man. Welcome back to another episode. Can't believe I'm saying that of Zero Reserve. I am your host today, Alex Black. With me, as always, is the lovely Alejandro Pantoja. Have you ever been called the lovely Alejandro Pantoja before?
I don't think so. I think that might be a first. Yeah.
How are you doing?
Pretty good. I mean, it's about time, to be honest.
Right.
Yeah.
As well, joining us today, the esteemed Aaron Groth. How we doing, buddy?
Hello, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on. Glad to have you guys
Uh,
back.
It's time.
It's time. It's about time.
yeah, and yeah, I wish I had it in me to do like a nice little wrestling intro for all of you, but we're missing that component of
Yeah,
of Zero
we're missing
Reserve
the big wrestler.
tonight.
Yeah.
We kicked that component out, you mean?
Oh right, yeah,
Long time ago.
yeah. Oh man, so
We're gonna go there eventually.
eventually, eventually. So
Teasers.
yeah, how's everybody been? I mean, it's been what? When was the last time we did an episode? 4 years ago? 3 years ago at this point? 3.5 years?
At least 3.5. Yeah.
I feel like it was right after Worlds in 2020. So I guess it's going on 3 years.
Yeah.
Probably.
Coming
It
up on
was.
three
It's
years.
hard to remember even exactly what the timeline was, or it's things happened fast back then. It happened
That's
fast.
true. Yeah. Well, and it's like
There's-
I don't know if this is like true for you guys as well, but I just feel like there's like a pre and post COVID time in my like memory, and everything pre COVID just feels so long ago now. And everything post COVID feels like so close together. I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but yeah, I
I think a
I
lot
don't
of
even
people
know.
had. I myself too had just like huge life changes after after COVID. So yeah, it's pretty natural to have kind of a
Well, and I think one of the
separation.
strangest things about it, you know, when you talk about COVID and also sort of the end of FFG's, you know, stewardship of thrones is you know who knows what would have happened, even like say FFG hadn't decided to can the game, with COVID. I mean, COVID may have like killed the competitive FFG version of the game anyway. Like even if they hadn't made that decision ahead of time, it was like
Yeah.
a weird core. Like it was a weird thing to happen sort of simultaneously because all like in person gaming at that point kind of ceased for a while, and
Mm.
and then there was this sort of period of people. I feel like digging through the ashes and sort of finding what was left, and here we are.
Yeah. You hate to say it that FFG kept this game alive by killing it. Because that's what
Yeah,
happened. I mean, I felt like it was on the cusp of we were moving into, I forget what it was called the first time, whatever council or whatever that was going to take it over. And everyone was migrating to online anyways. And I know Alejandro, me and you, and somewhat, CT were playing those online tournaments that
Yeah.
summer after Worlds.
Yeah. I mean, I played in quite a bit
Yeah,
of tournaments. I played in Europe like a bunch of tournaments for the first time, because
yeah,
you can do that from the internet.
exactly. So yeah, the Iron Throne kind of took over from the real play, and then yeah, eventually COVID hit, and it just kept going from there.
I think I won a national champion in that stint. I think I lost in a final there somewhere, but I
Yep.
vaguely remember that now.
Yeah,
what
that was a
nation was
run.
that?
Ooh,
What
I
what
don't know.
nationals was that?
There's so many
Spanish?
nationals.
Yeah, there was a
Yeah,
Oh,
bunch, but I think it was
Spanish
Spanish.
national.
Yeah,
Spanish
Yeah.
national. Yeah.
yeah.
Right on. Yeah, I mean, in that way, I suppose, it's kind of like adapt or die, right? And thankfully, we had such a great platform online for people to use. I mean, if that didn't exist, I wonder,
Yeah, the Iron
I
Throne is
wonder what
incredible.
would have happened. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So just a quick shout out to the Iron Throne.
Yeah.
Uh, Definitely. Do they still accept donations, don't they?
I think so. Yeah, they've still got a
Yeah,
Patreon,
it's a
and
new
and
thing now. Go ahead, Alejandro.
shout out Thrones DB too, and Stefan. He's been keeping it running, keeping the lights on there for a while
Yep.
too. He'll take donations. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So their new
Yeah. I mean,
thing
I
is,
know the shilling usually happens at the end of the episode, but
yeah,
if you're listening to this and you haven't already donated to Thrones DB or the Iron Throne, I don't know that the community in the way that it exists today would if not for those platforms. So I
absolutely
mean,
not. And
especially yeah.
the new thing is Ko-fi. I don't know if you guys saw that. We'll put it out. So that's gonna be the new way they're gonna be spreading the money out. So for anyone listening, check that out.
No, I'm not. I'm completely unfamiliar.
Yeah,
Why don't you illuminate that for us, Groth?
yeah. I have. I'll have more information when I see Will next week because I'm going to this tournament. Shout out to regionals next week for Missouri. I'm going to get more information on that, but it looks like it's going to be kind of an all-in-one place to donate, and then they'll be spreading it out where the money needs to go. Because right now, the head of this is called Global Operations Team. AGOT Global Operations Team is who's running
So
it again.
Thrones DB and the Iron Throne are sort of being like absorbed by the global operations team. Is that
Yeah. So the Global
okay?
Operations Team is the umbrella now, and then everything is falling underneath that. That was operating independently is now kind of going into concert and operating together. And what you guys are joining is at the right time where we've gotten a lot of new players in that have kind of put the life back into it. And it is, as we're going down memory lane, for me at least, I've kind of stayed with it mostly. I took about an eight,
Yeah,
9 months.
you've been stalwart, man.
Yeah, I took about an 8, 9 month, break for a little bit. Me and Todd Jansen, but just seeing it and you guys coming back. It feels like
Yeah,
coming back and being sold out almost. That's going to be, I think, another energy boost.
yeah, that's super exciting. Before we get too deep into the discussion about Thrones, and I mean, I know we're all very excited to talk about where things are at now and what things look like going forward. I'm interested in hearing a bit about everybody's lives and since last we spoke. I mean, you know, I wish I could say that I stayed in super close contact with either of you guys, but really, without Thrones there, it was kind of intermittent at best. I mean, like, what's new with you guys, in your lives and stuff, Alejandro?
Yeah, agreed. I got off of Facebook. Thrones was. I always said Thrones was the only thing keeping me on Facebook, and I certainly miss all the updates from everybody. But um, when the pandemic happened, actually like a year after, I got laid off and then moved to Folsom, and now Angela and I are living together, and we're getting married soon, actually.
All right,
Wait,
congrats.
wait. When did
Yeah,
that? When did this happen? When did this news come
it
out?
happened pretty recently.
Oh, damn, dude! Congrats,
Yeah,
man.
yeah,
Another
thanks.
Thrones couple.
Yeah, yeah. So we were planning on like a spring or fall next year thing, and neither of us want a big wedding, so don't look out for invites. I'm sorry. Uh, we're just gonna do family, but um, in the planning, we're both kind of like, yeah, should we just like do it now and then kind of do the celebration later? And we both
Yeah.
were super in on that. So in on the 19th, we're getting married.
Congrats, man. That's
Thank you.
exciting. That's
Thank you.
amazing. Yeah. Yeah, I can say from recent experience, dude, weddings are expensive. So make sure your celebration, make sure every person you invite to your celebration is super important to you. I wouldn't go back and change anything about mine, but it's like every invite is a big cost. So I totally understand that for sure. But that is super exciting, man. I'm stoked for you.
Thank you.
Did
Thank
you
you.
guys did you guys know that have you known for a while that you were going to tie the knot, or is was that sort of a recent thing?
We have we've been
Yeah,
figuring out
talking about
details
it.
for a little
Right.
while. Yeah.
Right on.
And
Yeah,
I'm
that's
like, yeah,
awesome.
let's just do it sooner
The
rather than
cow gets
later.
married. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Heck yeah, dude. Groth,
Yeah.
how about you, man? What's new in your life since our last Zero Reserve episode?
Yeah, basically I kept with the Thrones, like I said. I was still in Colorado Springs, keeping up with the local meta too. Even during the pandemic, we were able to do that. A lot of Coloradians, they love to get out of their house, so we had a different situation compared to a lot of the states. And then ended up for job. I had to go to California for a bit, and then from there moved to Tennessee, where I'm currently located, and just have a chill job now, and that's about it on my life. But I'm looking forward to talking Thrones with you guys and trying to get the American meta back going. The Euro's been carrying a lot of the load.
That's very true. Yeah. Yeah, man, you're a rambling man. Are you ever going to settle down in one place, or is this going to be your life for the next decade? Do you think?
Next 6 years at least till I retire out of the military, and then after that, looking. I was talking to Alejandro earlier, looking to stay out west. The weather fits me the best out there.
Yeah, come on out, man. We'd love to have you back for
I,
sure.
I will gladly take that invite. Humidity here killing me.
Yeah,
Maybe it's
yeah,
brutal.
It's brutal.
yeah, yeah. And
I
as for
got-
me,
yeah, what's up with
yeah, a
you?
lot of
It's big news.
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, just a complete overhaul of my life since COVID happened. I met a wonderful woman in 2020, and we're married now, and she's due to give birth to our son. Honestly, any day
Yeah.
now. Frankly,
Congratulations.
Congrats.
we we were in the hospital earlier this week. Um, so just for I mean, it's like literally every other thing. Like you call the doctor, being like, "Why don't you just come in?" So we make sure it's not anything. So we've done this song and dance twice now, and he's not
Yeah.
due for a few more weeks, but I anticipate we'll probably be back a time or two before the real deal. So yeah, we've had a couple dress rehearsals so far, but yeah, it's life comes at you fast. Um,
If
I
it's
got
weeks
married.
away, it could happen anytime now. Sorry. Sorry.
No, yeah, yeah. It's I got married a couple weeks ago too. I mean, it was yeah, and then yeah, I've been in school as well since the pandemic. I decided to go back to school and work on a bachelor's degree. I never finished mine initially, and chose to. I was an arts major out of high school, and decided to go into computer science, and I'll be continuing working towards that this fall. I've got my associate's degree, but I'll be going to the University of Washington for computer science. And yeah, so kind of a big change. I quit my job so that I can go back to school full time. And I was going to school part time and working full time for 2 years. But
Right.
now the focus will be on school and then part time work to sort of supplement. And yeah, all of that with wife and baby, and it's I'm not sure how I'll find time for Thrones. I picked a very interesting time to get back into it all, but
Yep.
I've seen plenty of other people with
Uh,
wives and kids and jobs and stuff play Thrones. So if they can do it, so can I, right?
it's doable. It's
Definitely.
doable.
Uh, I'm glad to hear that everybody's doing well. But I am excited to talk about some Thrones action. I mean, honestly, if I'm completely forthright about why I came back to the game, um, I think I partially due to my wedding. I I saw a handful of friends from Thrones at that, and we got together. Alejandro, you were there. We got together
Yeah.
the day before, and just got to talking. Schoenthal was there, and a few of the locals. Benji, Zach Dakota, Kyle James, Robert Brown, and Angela obviously came with you. Yeah, we were just talking about, it was just reminiscing, just talking about good old times, and it made me realize I think I had convinced myself that I didn't need Thrones, because Thrones, to me at least, like kind of went away after the initial sort of fan run attempt, um, failed. Because I was still invested at that point, even after the FFG collapse, or whatever you want to call it. But then after the initial fan run attempt failed, I think I and a lot of other players stepped away from the game. And it coincided with COVID, and it coincided with a lot of changes in my life, and it kind of just made sense to step away.
Yeah,
And,
and that's not to say anything of all all the tension that was in the community. I
absolutely.
mean, there was, you know,
Right. Mhm. Yeah, I
uh,
know. I personally um, wasn't involved with the organized play, or design, but I had friends who were, and so seeing them, so deflated and defeated in the aftermath of all that, it really made it hard for me to enjoy where the game was at. Um, and it made me hard. It made it hard for me to envision where the game was going. But being with old friends, before and at my wedding, and reminiscing about old times, it made me realize that I had really just convinced myself that I didn't want to play Thrones, and it wasn't actually true. I just realized that there was an itch that I was just ignoring, and as soon as I even got close to scratching it, I remembered how it felt. How good it felt to think and talk about the game that we all love. So, and then I guess I just have the kind of personality where when I get into something, I just kind of dive headfirst into it. Um, and so I mean, it was a matter of days after the wedding that I was kind of, fully back into thinking about it and playing and talking about it. So, how about you guys? I mean, obviously, Groth, you talked about how you took sort of an 8-month break, but Alejandro, what was that process like for you getting back into things?
you, I've mostly been away too, but I did have more connection because a couple of the NorCal guys still play, like Stefan's still, running Thrones DB, and Harrison, Marcel, Keith. There's a couple guys here who would play every once in a while on Iron Throne, and sometimes I'd join them in voice chat. I never played, but sometimes I'd sit there and watch or hardly half watch and just hang out with them. So, and we met up twice. We met up outside, where we went like mini golfing one time. That was real fun.
Nice.
Yeah. So there's still been a little bit of connection with a couple of the guys here.
That's good to hear.
But mostly stepped away from Thrones, and then just a couple of weeks before your wedding, they were planning the NorCal regional, and they happened to ask in like one of the groups that I was available, or maybe I even joined. Maybe I happened to join that night. I don't remember exactly how it works, but I was like, if you do it on this day, I'm available, and it just happened that like everybody else that may go to this thing was also available on that day. So then I was signed up for a regional, and at some point I was gonna have to start figuring out what kind of cardboard I wanted to play. So after your wedding, when we're talking about potentially getting back into it, seemed like the perfect time if I was gonna go to a tournament anyways. And we just started talking about cards there. But there,
yeah. Having a purpose, like you being like, I'm going to a regional in 2 weeks, or a week or whatever it was.
yeah.
That was like all the excuse I needed to be like, okay, I got something. I have a task. I'm like a dog who just needs to be told what to do. Like I'm just like hyper fixated on this task. Like I
Yeah.
wasn't even going to the event, but I was like, there were days that I was like, I think I'm more interested in Alejandro's regional than he is, and
Yeah.
that's not a knock on you. I just think
Uh,
I'm just know.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but yeah, I guess we could segue this into talking about what that preparation looked like.
One second,
Um,
I got something to say on this because I think it's
oh
a very
yeah,
good topic.
absolutely. I'm in.
Yeah, just seeing you guys like talk about organically, you guys getting back in. And then my run, I just kind of stuck with it after everything. What you guys discussed, what was going on at the end of what was it, Worlds 2019? Or
Yeah,
was there?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
happened in
2019 that
2020, but
happened
it
in
was
2020.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 Right before, right? Like in
Right
February of
before, there we
2020.
go.
Yeah.
Yep, there we go. Yeah, and I couldn't go because it was the birth of my second son, third kid. So I missed out on that. So I just kind of stuck it through. But you guys talking organically, how you guys came in, like organically for me, that kept me going was these just odd online tournaments that kept going by. Some of the people we talk about, especially North Cal guys, they've been keeping the America meta going, whether they know it or not. But you guys talk about, basically after that summer of those tournaments, then, kind of took a break and then they went into the whole making, the redesigns. And then we started off with, I think was it, Here Are My Words maybe, or trying to think of what was it? No, Forgotten Heroes was the first pack coming out. And then next thing you know, you got this American, Ballad Nations happens, and then recently 8 Westeros regions, and you got these new people coming from Scandinavia and Germany and all this other places. So it's just really cool for me to just get those little jumps, interjections. So that's kind of organically what kept me going. But like what you guys are talking about, where because I think there's so many excuses starting to come now.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I guess we could
I think a
approach
lot of people are
this
waiting
from
for
the
that.
perspective of, maybe somebody who's listening to this hasn't gotten back into Thrones yet or at all. So maybe they don't have any context for where the game is at right now. So maybe we could use this time to kind of, I guess, explain what's going on. I mean, um, in our absence, at least Alejandro and I's, I mean, this new, not so new anymore, but new to us organization, the GOT, right? Is that's what they're called?
Correct. Yep.
They've designed and released, um, I think, 5 expansion packs as well. They have redesigned 60 cards from previous sets. And that has been their way of, uh, addressing issues within the game. Instead of having an extremely bloated, restricted list and pod list, which is a little bit of a change from the FFG, restricted list. They chose to redesign 60 cards and sort of move forward from that place. A lot of cards where it would have made sense for there to be some sort of limitation on the card or a minor change. Some of them are more major than others. In fact, some of the cards are completely different. I would say that was really only a handful of cards that were just are completely different cards now. For the most part, it's either a change of a word or there's a limit to the ability where there used to be none, or there's more of a limitation where there used to be a minor limitation. But yeah, that's sort of where the game is at now. I don't know the exact number of cards that have been released since we last had a Zero Reserve episode, but I think it's 5 expansion packs ranging from 2 to 5 cards per faction in each. But yeah, I definitely think that a lot of people might just be waiting for a good reason to come back to the game, and some people might need more convincing, and that's totally fine. And I think that that's the important thing is you keep using the word organically, Groth. And I do think that's what's important is that, people are going to come back if they want to, and if they're given a good reason to. I didn't need a really compelling reason, it turns out. I just needed to talk to people who I
Exactly.
hadn't talked to in a long time and sort of have that feeling again, that sort of like intangible feeling that playing and talking about Thrones gives me.
Absolutely.
To want to experience that again, to sort of like chase that high almost. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if
I
we
was
want to dive
younger.
deeper into sort of what's gone on like in the last 3 years, but I'd love to like maybe examine the state of the game right now if you guys are down to do that.
ACG, I didn't get that, connection and like you said, with that personality to just die in. And Thrones was that for me. And I think it was for a lot of people. And to use, the CT quote from George R. R. Martin that he kind of gave us for this episode, old stories are like old friends. You just have to visit them from time to time. And that's all it sometimes takes, right? You guys visit each other for Alex's wedding was the catalyst, and here we are.
Yeah, shouts to CT, who is not on this episode, but was kind enough to provide us with an outline, which is kind of ironic. Um, but
Yeah, very ironic.
yeah, let's jump into talking about where the game is at right now. I mean, I think literally the first like actual conversation that was had about the current state of Thrones was Alejandro. You said that you thought the new Casterly Rock was a potentially powerful card. Is that am I misrepresenting that conversation?
That sounds right. I think I opened up the card list and saw that there was a ton of locations that cost 5. I was like, this is probably where I want to start.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and so then I'm looking at this card and I'm saying like, okay, how do we make a card that ostensibly creates 3 gold a turn and has sort of other tertiary abilities like how do we best like abuse this card? Like I'm thinking very like micro level, right? I'm just like examining the card and I'm thinking like, how do we make this card? How do we elevate this card to its highest point? And I'm thinking, it's going to take at least 2 turns to recoup your investment, and a card like that probably suits itself best in a deck that wants to go long, so that you're gaining a larger, the amount of resources gained is greater over a longer period of time. So I'm thinking control. So then we're thinking about all the ways that we can abuse, having extra gold on cards, Ashmark and bestow cards, and all this stuff.
Yeah,
And
Casterly Walk, just for those at home that haven't looked at the cards, puts a gold on 3 cards, and then if it's standing, you can spend gold from Lannister cards as if they're in your gold pool. I think that's the text about the text.
yeah, and I
Um,
I do this every time I like see a card and I read like one line of the entire card, and I get hyper fixated on that part. And then like 2 days later, after I've like designed decks and shit, I like read the rest of the card, and then I'm like, oh, this isn't gonna work at all. Like, I think when I first read the card, I was assuming like, oh, you can activate it and you can use the gold like right away,
right.
and that is definitely a problem with my like evaluating of things. I have sort of a delayed like understanding usually of a card, especially if there are like multiple components to it. Um, but yeah, I mean, it didn't take long before you had to sort of put the brakes on things, Alejandro, and
Yeah.
you said you said like, okay, like we're going in one direction here. We're like trying to design a control deck, but we know nothing about the format, and really you can't make a good control deck unless you know what you're trying to control.
Right. Yeah,
So
yeah. Like, that was, it was funny because that's exactly what happened, right? We just kind of looked at one card, and then we dove down this road for a couple of days, and we're like, wait, hold on, let's zoom out a little bit. Let's take a step back here.
right. I mean, it's like it's one thing to try to design a deck in this like perfect vacuum, but without context, we were designing a deck without context. It just didn't make much sense. But at that point, it's like, okay, so if I'm going to zoom out, that's going to require me to absorb and process like all this new information, all 5 expansion packs, all 60 redesigns, and that's going to take time, right? I can't do all of
Yeah.
that at once. So I sort of set out to try and understand as best I could sort of the state of the game, going from faction to faction, and also just thinking generally like, I don't know if the Greater Thrones community feels this way, but for me, since it's a new format, I I and I think Groth, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Brand the Builder pack release was like fairly recent, right?
Yes, it's fairly recent. I mean, we are on as high as honor now, and we're probably about maybe a month to almost 2 months in on that. I think we're probably a little over a month actually. But Brain the Builder was maybe when you guys started talking about that in the chat, just to give context. And this is like again after your wedding, Alex, and then we'll get to the excuse of why you guys came back for Alejandro's regional in a bit. But you guys were talking about that card, and Brain the Builder maybe been out like maybe 3 to 4 weeks.
But this is
Hmm.
only like 3 weeks ago that we were having these conversations. I don't
Yeah,
I don't know when exactly Brand the Builder was, but I think, yeah, our conversations have been pretty recent.
very recent
Right.
conversations, and Brain the Builder barely has been out maybe a month that you guys started
Okay, okay.
talking about.
Yeah, and I mean,
Like official
not a
release, I
ton
mean.
of
Yeah.
tournaments between then and now, necessarily, and we're in
No.
regional season. I know there were some adjustments to the restricted lists post Worlds, which I believe was in the summer at some point, and Greyjoy won that, and so there were some adjustments to sort of bring Greyjoy down a level. It just felt like the meta was still relatively fresh and unsolved,
Yeah,
and so we kind of approached preparing for Alejandro's regional in that way, um,
if I may interject
and
real quick.
and we what's
If I
that?
may interject, if I may interject real
Yeah, go
quick,
ahead.
just to
Please
show that
do.
you guys haven't lost anything. Recently, Rack Online, the just for people who may not know, there's most of the online stuff is got friendly open in the Discord. That's what's been keeping a lot of online going. He just recently won with plans to free companies. Their kind of overall tournament. So you guys were
Right.
to rock because that's what was the driving engine.
Oh, cool.
So
Nice.
you guys
Yeah.
picked the right card to start the conversation to come back into tournaments.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure we were really going in the same direction, but who
Probably
knows?
not.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I thought it was pretty cool coincidence
There's
though.
a difference between recognizing a card as powerful and
Yeah,
actually executing on it.
finally,
But
yeah.
um, but yeah, good for them. That's awesome. Um, yeah. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, the first thing I did was kind of say, all right, well, what decks from the last time I was playing Thrones might still be largely intact, and unaffected by these redesigns and or these new pod restrictions or the new restricted list, etc. So I looked at like Start Crossing, Greyjoy Crossing, various crossing decks. I'm thinking fresh format. Let's go fast. People are going to try to be doing sort of dirtily stuff, playing with cool 5 cost locations. The game might be relatively slow, and so just try to win quick. And we'll circle back to it, but definitely I found in that process that Barracohor still seemed like a very good deck, and in fact, I saw a few Jousting Pavilion results where Barracohor won, so that was promising. And really, other than a, an adjustment to Solis Baratheon, whereas you used to have a constant reduction in R'hllor attachments, now it's one per phase or per round reduction. The deck was largely untouched outside of some of the plots, but the plots are more of a universal. They affect decks universally more so. Uh,
Yep.
but as far as like actually in faction cards, not a ton of changes. So it seems like if you want to go
Yep.
fast, Barracohor might be a great option. Another deck that stood out to me, and this one was kind of again based on what are the most powerful cards that they just released in this new pack. I don't know if you guys agree, but I definitely think Castle Black's probably the strongest stronghold, and uh, and the deck that card fits in the best is probably um, a deck that plays really powerful characters because it stands them, as well as and it just seemed like Aloof was floating around in various mid-range decks, whether it be Greyjoy or Stark or Night's Watch or Tyrell. And I've seen, again, just going back to Jousting Pavilion and seeing what players who have been playing a lot more than me are doing, and I'm seeing a lot of Night's Watch Aloof doing well. So, looked at that deck. Definitely don't think we necessarily have the greatest build, but I mean, the deck seemed really solid when we played some games with it, and Castle Black definitely seemed to fit in that deck, as well as Castle Black. The the plot, Brand the Builder, seemed to fit pretty well into that general sort of like core wall defensive strategy, which could now also play these big, great, impressive characters for cheap.
And
So
there's a plot too that's for both, you know, because you're hitting Castle Black and of course Great Ranging, working in with that for the realm helps both Army and Stronghold. So Night's Watch is just like inherently built for this, and I agree with what you said. But Castle Black is probably the strongest five drop.
Yeah, that's one of the inefficiencies I remember. Like, just basically my whole Thrones career, figuring like I just don't play enough money in plots. Like I like plots that do cool things way too much probably,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and so like all the decks I want to play now, I want to figure out like how I play big money plots, or at least a couple, right? That and this for the realm plot, it's like 8 gold, right? No downside. Seems pretty good
zero.
in a deck
Yeah,
that can consistently use the discount there.
yeah.
yep,
And the fact that
absolutely.
Great Ranging has great traits, just to use that pun there. And you have a plot that's going to hit both. You know, an
Right.
army you want to play and a stronghold you want to play. I mean, where's the downside in a faction like
And
that?
multiples, right? You're probably
Yep.
playing plenty of armies in this deck. You're playing both of the big strongholds
Yep.
at a
Yeah, I can
nice
think of
course.
at least the reserve army and the Great Ranging, and I'm sure there's probably another one I'm not thinking of.
Yeah. What's their 4 drop 5 power? The core card too, which is I don't know if they're
Ranging party,
ranging.
yeah.
Is it
Is
ranging? Yeah.
Ranging Party an army as well as a Ranger? Okay, nice. Yeah,
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
pretty
yeah, that
sure
makes it
they're an
pretty. That makes
army.
it pretty easy.
Yeah, there.
Yeah, that makes
They
it
are
pretty easy to play
very
that
easy.
plot.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, you've got at least 12 cards you can use the full reduction on. So, yeah, no,
Which
I
makes them
mean,
ubiquitous to use it. So yeah.
right. Plus, you've got the addition of the new Samuel card, which, I mean, I've only played a couple games with Night's Watch Aloof. I'm not 100% certain the card is great, but it seems like it is strong. Um, I guess, I don't know, Alejandro, you played a couple games with Night's Watch Aloof. How do you feel about the new Samuel?
Seems okay. Seems pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, our podcast name is Zero Reserve, but like half the cards they printed in Night's Watch have reserve boosts on them.
Right. Yeah. Definitely, they're definitely leaning into that. They're definitely leaning into that theme for Night's Watch.
Yeah. I
So
mean, he's a copy of like Tyrell Brienne. You know, she went off of strength. He's going
right,
off of reserve. Yeah.
Right.
right. I guess that is true. Yeah, there's some similarities there. I
There's
wonder if
yeah.
that foretells some future design choices. Maybe they'll make a similar
Yeah.
character in every faction.
I think it would be cool. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I like symmetry, so I'm down for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then uh, I just played against a Drown God deck online a couple times, and it just seemed like, again, with the format being kind of, I mean, the format seemed slow. I don't necessarily think that it should be slow, but from what I was seeing played and what I was seeing do well, it seemed like a passive power deck could be good. Also, again, one of those decks that wasn't super heavily hit by the changes. I mean, the biggest change, honestly, is that the disciples are max 2 per round now, so you can't just have 2 out and gaining 4 power a phase, or max 2 per phase, I'm sorry, instead of limit 2. So it's a little slower, but really in practice, it's still quite fast. And I think there was a slight adjustment to Drown God Fanatic.
Yeah.
Um, you can only use it once now, I think, per round. The resurrection clause or what have you
He also discards instead of die, like gets placed on the death pile.
does discard. which is true. But in Drown God, you usually have,
Well, you hope you do, yeah.
ribs in play, or hope you
Yeah.
do. Yeah. So, the deck might not actually be as good as I thought. I didn't get to play with it enough, but in my head, it seems like it's positioned well,
I think
in the format.
I think you it is just on the fact that and you use cohort Alex first as the example. What I'm seeing now is, I mean, it's always been there. Intimidate. I mean, everyone remembers Bob in the beginning with the core, how rough he was to deal with. I think we're at that point where what's making the game fast is intimidate.
Sure. Yeah. Well, just the speed at which the deck, gains power. Obviously, Bob is just
No.
really strong, and Bob plus Azor High Reborn is
Yeah.
just a very potent combination.
So
So
Drown God doesn't really
it,
care, right? So I think it is a nice counter to it. Okay, intimidate me, but I'm still making him power off other means.
yeah, I think Cohort is probably too fast for Drown God. I think Drown God probably takes advantage of just the mid range decks.
Yeah.
Um, because if your game plan is to win by just making challenges on turn 4 or 5, or even later than that, Drown God engine should theoretically be up and running at that point. Um,
Correct.
so plus, depending on what banner or agenda you play, you might be, you're probably going to be trying to slow them down as much as possible. So maybe in that regard, like if you're playing a sun banner and you're stripping all of, you know, like stripping bears icons, or you're like removing characters from challenges, or secret pacts and stuff like that. But um, definitely didn't firmly feel like I had a grasp for the best agenda for Drown God at the moment. But yeah, seems like there could be something there. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's also the Mummers deck that Martin Lewis played. I think won a regional with. That deck seems pretty strong. I hear drawing cards is good, and you draw like one card per fool you have in play with that deck every turn, and it also makes all your guys bigger, and you have a bunch of pretty obnoxious, like just like with the Targ Sea Blood deck from Worlds. I mean, anytime you're cheating on econ, you know, and making some sort of big tempo play, putting a character into play for less than they cost, and then it's potentially pretty swingy. So like all the mercenary stuff with Tyrion and the event that they printed, Golden Company or Gold Company or whatever it is. Yeah, it just seems like a pretty powerful deck as well, and I would say definitely something to be considering when preparing for an event. But yeah, Alejandro, why don't you talk a little bit about, like, I guess where your headspace was at leading up to your regional in terms of the meta and what you expected to see?
Yeah, I think before we got together and started talking this, I was probably just gonna build some target deck and go have fun with that. And then once we started talking, um, we had these conversations together, right? We decide, and fast sounds good to me. Once you kind of pointed out Barakohor, that that was pretty easy to make my decision after that. Like I felt.
Right. Well, there's a familiarity with the deck, right? Because it was a deck you had been strongly considering for Worlds in 2020.
Yeah, I thought I was gonna play that at that 2019 Worlds, where we before the test house. Man, that was a good time. Um, and I won the last time there was a NorCal regional. I won it with Barakohor, so it felt like why not? Let's do that again.
Yeah, Old Faithful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's
Uh,
just, I mean, there's a benefit to, especially when you're coming into a tournament after like a long hiatus, like just like a muscle memory thing with the
mhm.
deck, you know. I'm sure you probably benefited from just that familiarity with Barracohor. I mean, obviously you played Barracohor at the regional. I guess do you want to talk a little bit about how the regional went, and I guess if you like could go back, if you would do anything differently?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it was a great time. I mean, gosh, it's so nice when your meta is like awesome, right? Like it was great to see everybody, and there was 8 of us that showed up. One of my buddies, Shelby, uh, him and I started playing Thrones years and years ago, so he got me into Thrones. And he had just finished like his pilot school, so he was looking to celebrate. I told him I was going to a regional, and he's like, "Oh, can I come?" And so Shelby went with me, which is real cool. Like good old days. Um, Drove out to San Francisco. Um, Great, great. Like the deck was awesome. I don't know exactly how much I want to talk, but sorry. It was a good time. It was a good time. That's what I got.
Right on. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
I
what
got
did you? Are you not wanting to talk about sort of your result or the deck you played in the final?
No, 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 not at all. No. Yeah. If I had to do anything again, sorry. Let me finish that thought. No, I would.
Oh yeah,
I'd
absolutely.
probably play the exact same. I'd probably, if I was going to play another tournament, I'd probably play that deck again. Um, there was definitely some rust in there for sure. Like the
Mhm.
cohort deck has a pretty good amount of decisions with the cohort. And I definitely didn't always make those decisions correctly. So, but
Right.
it was a blast. I don't
And you
uh
played
yeah,
against a Martel core deck in the final, right?
yeah, yeah. So I played against Stefan and then Shelby. Um, and then I should have the tournament up. Sorry. Let me Oh, and then I played against Marcel in the Swiss final. Um and then I played a mirror match in the top 4 game against Keith playing Bear Cohort, and I'm not exactly sure how I won that game. I didn't see a king until super late, but and
Were
then in the
there any notable differences between the two Barracuda decks?
not really actually. He was super interested in looking at my list just to see how far apart we ended up, and we had the exact same plot line, and
Oh wow, really?
yeah, yeah,
That's kind of wild.
yeah, that was wild. And it's pretty close. I think we had like a sweet sleep in the deck, and he didn't or something. Like
I was going to ask you about the sweet sleep. Would you play the sweet sleep again?
yes, and
Okay.
I think I think it wasn't quite in my memory bank enough because there was definitely a time or two where that sweet sleep would have been good.
Yeah.
it's
Um,
definitely it's a
Yeah,
money
that's kind of
card.
wild. Yeah. Yeah. He, your opponent Keith was playing Mad King's Command too, though.
yeah, yeah.
Interesting. How did that plot play for you on the day?
Um, so my first couple of games were over pretty fast. Like,
As Derek O'Hare is wont to do.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, like just sometimes just rolls people, right? Like if you get
Hmm.
uh, and there's so much like tempo efficiency in the deck where in challenges like you're standing, and so you get multiple intimidates, and oftentimes you pass your challenges after being first player, and your opponent, this board has been knelt out, so they also pass challenges. Uh,
Right.
Intimidate.
um,
God, I cannot tell you how many times online I'm playing and I like O'Hare away my Azor High Reborn. And then I'm like, why did I not get renowned? Why did I not intimidate? I'm like, oh, because I'm an idiot.
No, yeah, it
The
works the
character's
other
no
way.
longer in the fucking challenge.
Hmm.
Jesus, yeah. So hopefully you played games better than I did. But
Yeah, I didn't mess that up, but
that's good. No, you
yeah,
had enough experience with the deck to know better than to
yeah,
do that.
yeah.
So then in the final, you played against Martel Cohor, and it sounds like that wasn't a great matchup to begin with, and you won the first game in the Swiss. I have a feeling your opponent probably benefited from knowing a lot about your deck going into that game. Would you agree with that statement?
Um, I'm not sure that the cohort deck is that original. Um,
Sure.
it-
But I mean, like your plot line, knowing like
yeah,
Definitely
probably
plots.
most of what plots to expect. Obviously, like we're not thinking that out of the box with Barracohor, but like even though your other Barracohor opponent had the exact same plot line, I mean, at least in my head, I'm like, you could have played one of probably 15 plots or 20 plots, you know?
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's true. I think I played the final game pretty sloppy. I don't super love uh, breaking these down after the fact. I feel like I don't give my opponent, or I don't want to not give my opponent enough credit, but I definitely
No, absolutely. All
like
the credit in the world to your opponent. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, and I think it was sloppy. I like where in the game a card or two will swing it, and I think I might have missed like two Stannis triggers to draw a card, right? Like, which is pretty big. Um,
sure. Yeah.
and I definitely did not give the deck enough respect on how much it could attrition my board, which
Uh,
Barracohor does not do well against attrition. And in the first game, I had an incredible start, and he had a like VD on turn two, which then let me just dump out everything. And in the
yeah.
in the final game, I didn't quite have that fast a start, and I underestimated his ability to whittle my board down and not have to VD right away. And so I got slowed down. And in my first game, I saw a dupe on. I don't even know what this plot is, but there's a plot now where after dominance, they can pick two unique characters and return them to hand, which is
Mhm.
really bad for that deck. So when they can just spot remove your king. And in the first game, I drew a dupe on that turn that he played that card for my Stannis.
The
So
father. That's
Right.
the
And
father.
it lets them choose, they have to choose one unique they control and one unique you control, right?
Yeah,
yeah, to
non-army,
bounce the
6 costs or
hand.
higher.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It has to be 6 cost or higher.
non-army.
No.
No.
So like they can choose like their 2 cost unique and they can choose your king, right?
I believe
Wait, how does
it's the father. The plot
the
is the father.
father?
Yeah.
Uh,
So I believe for them, yeah, when Dominus phase ends, choose a unique non-army character. Just yeah, unique
Yeah,
non-army.
choose a non-unique
Yeah,
army character or a unique
only
non-army
6 costs.
character controlled by each player.
The
So there's no
stranger is
limitation on
yeah,
on the
cost.
cost, yeah.
So especially
yeah.
I imagine Martel Cohort is probably playing like a lot
Well,
of the small unique characters.
yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I mean, and even like some of them have enters play abilities that you can. So that's really good for like a buyback effect,
Right.
like
Correct.
There's
Yeah.
Hota or I don't know. There are
or
probably some
or his
others
his
that I'm
red
not thinking
viper
of,
with a
but
with a
yeah, I could see
hunters.
how that would be a
With a
problematic
milk.
plot for
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
rest of.
Yeah.
Well, there goes Alex. Um, yeah, yeah. There was a hunting accident on the red viper, which he happily, didn't save the red viper, returned in hand, and off goes the hunting accident.
Yeah. Exactly. There's
Sorry about
a
that, guys. I think I dropped out for a second.
yeah. No
I
problem.
on that
But
turn, I also played myself. Uh I could have on that turn I drew up a Bobby, and I had played the King in the North, so I couldn't reduce to pay for him, and
like
I was like 1 or 2 power away
Yeah,
from winning, and I couldn't marshal him, and I had like
yeah.
I was
King of the
drawing
North is
completely dead.
King of the North is one of those plots that I'm not sold on Barracohor right now. I mean, I'm not sold on the plot. In
No.
general, it's just like it's one of the few ways for you to completely like shut down your opponent, but it also half hinders you too. And I'm not sure. I mean, would you keep that plot in the line, you think, if you were to play the tournament over?
That's a good question. Um,
I feel like the biggest question marks, I mean, if you're okay divulging more of the plot
yeah,
line,
yeah, yeah,
again,
yeah,
it's
yeah. I
not like
mean,
super original, but
yeah.
like, the biggest question marks I think were the King in the North and the barring the gates, because they're kind of situational.
Yeah.
The King in the North is a little bit more of a catch-all, but also, yeah, like it adversely affects you. You can't use your dragons, you can't use your zero cost reducing locations. You can't use your King's Roads, your Great Hall. You can't use. I think there, are some attachments that you can't use either that it shuts off, right?
Yeah,
Because
it's everything that does have a
Yeah.
king or
I don't think
queen trait.
All the
I don't
attachments
think
and stuff.
all
Yeah.
the yeah. So like it turns Lightbringer off,
Yeah.
which is annoying. Like at least the
All the
stand.
non-passive ones. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. All the
yeah.
Yeah.
It still
non-passive
gives
and
you
stuff.
renown,
Yeah.
obviously, but yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I didn't play in the tournament, but I could see that plot being changed in the future. So
Yeah. The
Yeah,
deck
for
probably
all
well,
wants
cool.
more
Did
money.
you
The deck probably wants more money.
want more money?
yep,
Yeah,
more
fair
money.
enough. Yeah, I
Yep.
mean, yeah, that's even with two loan, the deck wants more money. I mean, I get it.
It also really hurts not having you in or you die because
Mhm.
it's very prone to like dumping out its hand and then like kind of looking around, not knowing what else to do. Like
Yep.
if the if
Well, you
the if
can't
the
play
board's
win or
not good
die
enough to
alone.
win it, then yeah, you
Yeah.
can't. Yeah. So
I'm not sure how to solve that problem, to
w-
be frank.
it might we might want to go from Rose Roads to the gates.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I really
Queen's
don't like the
Gates.
Rose Roads. That could be. I mean, my initial build had Gates over Rose Roads just because, yeah, you run out of gas so quickly. Um, so yeah, maybe it wants to go back to Gates. That could be. It's just your setups take a big hit.
Yeah,
Um,
and you never want to pay that gold for future money. Like you really it's really
you're
hard to
not
pull
paying it
smart.
for money. You're not paying it for money in the
Right,
future.
that's
Like
fair.
you're
That's
just paying
fair.
it for the cards, which
That's
is
fair,
okay. I
actually.
mean,
Yeah,
trading
that's
one
true.
gold for two cards, like a lot of times in like the mid game, turn three, turn four, turn five, if you are still around, if the game's still happening at that point, you're fine trading one gold to draw two cards the same turn. I think most times.
Yeah, no,
So
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, yeah, there's definitely adjustments we can make.
yeah,
But the deck's,
yeah,
I had a blast playing, the deck was a lot of fun. Tons of fun
right.
seeing opponents. We all went to the bar and hung out for hours afterwards. It was awesome.
Hell yes, that's awesome.
Yeah, definitely share pictures on Dirty
Well,
Bluffing.
yeah, and I mean, I know Groth. You mentioned you've got a regional coming up here in a couple weeks in Missouri, um, and we'll probably be diving into that preparation just like we did for Alejandro. So um, excited and looking forward to that. Alex, did you
Yep.
have any sort of closing thoughts on the NorCal regional before we kind of move on?
No, it was great. Uh, looking forward to the next tournament. Maybe we. It sounds like nationals hasn't quite been decided, or what's going on there. I guess, but
Vegas,
I'm, I'm, I'm
Vegas, Vegas.
Vegas.
a Vegas Nationals would be something.
I mean, I'm biased, you know. It's West Coast National. That would be. I don't even know if I could go, frankly, with having a kid. But it's. I'm sure people would enjoy Vegas if it happened there. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of upcoming events, yeah, the whole getting back into Thrones, has really it's been a bit of a perspective shift for me. I think previously, um, Thrones was definitely in a healthier place in my region when I started playing in 2016. The game was brand new, and it had a pretty good onset of players here in the Pacific Northwest. I think one of the first tournaments, I wasn't in attendance, but one of the first tournaments here was like 40 people, which is obviously quite large for just like a regular. I don't even know if it was a store I don't think it was even a store championship. It was just like a, hey, here's this game, let's have a tournament situation. And not that many people stuck around, but the scene was pretty consistently, between like 10 and 20, 25 people for the first few years, and I came into it as an outsider. I wasn't much of a 1.0 player or stalwart. I didn't really know other people in the community. I was just coming into it as someone who enjoyed the mechanics of the game and was interested in, you know, finding out what the competitive scene had to offer in my area to start.
Yeah.
Um,
For
and
con for context though, that was pretty normal though, right? I started playing in Europe,
Absolutely, yeah,
so it was
I
definitely
think so. Yeah,
it's that starter of, oh, there's 40 or 50 people for store champ, or regional or whatever. And then of course, like you said, the people who are going to stick around are going to stick around with the game within the year, right?
right. Yeah, I mean, obviously, it was a bunch of people. It was the FFG. It was the FFG LCG syndrome, kind of, where it was like brand
Yep.
new FFG game. It's going to kind of cannibalize on all the previous FFG
What was
card games.
it? Cthulhu,
Um,
and then
there was Conquest.
Conquest. Yep.
There was Netrunner, which I mean,
Yep.
I don't think I ultimately
Yep.
don't think it siphoned that many people away from Netrunner, but there was some overlap. There were people who liked Netrunner and who were willing to give Thrones a shot, who maybe weren't
Shot.
one
Yep.
1.0 players.
Yep.
So yeah, but I guess my point is that the meta and the community, regionally speaking, was healthy, and it didn't need me as like as an event runner or organizer or any of this kind of stuff. I was just a guy trying to play fun decks and do well in tournaments.
Yep.
And even that took a while. At first, I just wanted to have fun and I just wanted to meet people. And coming back to the game now, I hadn't mentioned this previously, but one of the local stalwarts and event runners, Benji, he runs a yearly melee event at his house called the Doom of Bulgaria. It's just a cookout
Nice.
where we play melee, and that was held earlier this year. Even though Benji has since moved, or has previously to the event moved to Spokane, which for those of you who aren't geographically familiar with the region, it's about 5 hours away from Seattle. He came back. He drove back to Seattle, and we had the event at someone else's house. And that was actually the first time I had played Thrones at all, like touched a Thrones card since Worlds. I had to borrow a deck. I couldn't find my collection. It was in storage, and so that was like the taste,
Yep.
before the conversations at my wedding and all that kind of stuff, where like the pyre was kind of ignited, I guess, if you want to call it that. But um, so yeah, I mean, after helping Alejandro prepare for this regional, after getting excited about Thrones again, I kind of looked around and I said, well, Benji's moved to Spokane, and all these organizers, all these players from this area, they're not actively, holding events, running tournaments, hosting weekly get-togethers, and all this stuff. And so I thought, maybe it's time that I take on a different role, in the community. And I have I'm making slowly attempts at trying to sort of um, reconstitute the scene in the Pacific Northwest, or at least in the Seattle metro area. And yeah, I put a feeler post out on our Facebook page, and I got a lot of good feedback and a lot of good, a lot of good, um, just like, I guess, I don't know. Yeah, feedback, I guess, is the word I'm looking for. But, and I'm just, I'm thinking like, what's a good way to what's a low stakes way to get people back to the table? Players from old, because I want to attract new players, of course, too. But I think you can't really do that until you have events that are happening where new players can show up. You know,
Agreed. Yep.
um, and so my thought was, well, if people are like me, they don't have all the new stuff. If they haven't been playing, and maybe there's probably a couple people in Seattle who do, who maybe don't, who maybe aren't on Facebook or what have you. I'm always surprised to find people, but I thought that I would host a Cube event in the next few weeks, and I reached out to a bunch of people in the area, and I got a ton of positive responses. People saying, yeah, I've absolutely, I've been wanting to play Thrones again, and I'd love to come and play in a Cube event, and I'm hoping that out of that, spawns a more regular thing in my area, and I'd love to facilitate that in whatever way possible, and so that kind of just leads me to this topic of talking about we can look at it in the larger scope of sort of cultivating a local scene, but also I wanted to talk specifically about cube drafting and the idea of cube, because I don't know how many of our listeners are familiar with cube. And it's kind of a concept from other card games, but it can be applied really to any card game. So, yeah, what is your guys' familiarity with cubes? Have you ever cubed before? Um, and we'll kind of explain what a cube is, I guess. But Groth, how about you take that one first?
Yeah. First experiences was Star Wars CCG, and then of course Magic is known for it. Um, and this is definitely something that was during the dark Yu-Gi-Oh and Pokemon. Really, that was all the selection. Chris, Chris Thompson, and a couple of the indie folks when I was, still living in the Indianapolis area. That's what we did Friday, Saturday night. We do board games and cubes to just, like you said, just get that itch out to, play some cardboard. And yeah, the idea of the cube is, just taking kind of the whole, pool of cards that are out there and mixing it up. And for Thrones, it would be basically melee, right? That kind of version of it.
Well, not necessarily.
Not,
I guess you
not the stat,
could.
but yeah, it's
Yeah,
just
I
like
think
it's a
the
multiplayer
crux.
dimension, I guess, with
Yeah,
the
it is a way to play the game with multiple people, right? It's a
yeah.
way so I'm
Instead
not
of
sure
one
how
v
many
one.
people
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure how many people played the old draft set for second edition, but it's a form of it's a draft. It's a form of Thrones where you draft a deck from a predetermined allotment of cards. And so there's strategy involved in the drafting process. You're trying to build a deck for synergy.
Play,
You're trying to build a deck for obviously having, like, depending on what the rules of the cube are, having cards within your faction or whatever. And then you're playing games one on
yeah,
one with
and
other people who
I'm just
also
saying
drafted from the same
with
cube.
the Thrones that the melee format really lends itself
Sure.
easily, I guess, to it. Um,
Um,
to
yeah,
Cube
Alejandro,
and
do you
Thrones.
do you have any experience with cube?
I'm trying to remember it, and I think I have never cubed it all.
Alex is
Wait, can you hear
like
me?
he's typing in the chat. I lost him.
No, I was just
Oh,
I
there we
was
go.
just
All
making
right.
sure there wasn't a delay.
Yeah.
But
There
yeah,
we go.
Alejandro, you don't
Got you
think you've
back.
ever cubed before?
No, I think I've never cubed before. I I'm very familiar with the format. I've watched uh not a whole lot, but I guess I mostly see it, right? Like there was one time after like a regional down in San Diego, there's a CCG cube, probably show and thaw, but I don't actually know who. But I had a I wasn't after the tournament I had to drive up and back. So I didn't cube then. And I think I've never cubed. I've drafted a couple of times, but I don't think I've ever cubed in any game. But I do know um what it is, and I'd cube if somebody set it up. Shoot.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like it's a repeatable draft format,
Hmm.
right? Like a lot of times in draft formats, you have to buy product, you have to open the product, and then you draft it, and then you play it. And Cube is like this repeatable variant of that, where all you have to do is shuffle up and dole out, you know, however many cards per pack, and then you do the drafting, you do the playing. So it's a nice thing to invest in, and especially like I said, for players who don't like, it would be hard for me to say, oh, let's have a joust event when a lot of the people I expect to come and play, myself included, don't have the new cards yet, or don't have a familiarity with the format or anything like that.
Hmm.
So I thought Cube would be a really cool way to sort of a reintegration, sort of, so to speak, or a reintroduction into the state of things, and hopefully I'll have my new cards by the time this event happens, and I can sneak some cool cards into the cube, and people can get some exposure to that. But yeah, so cube. I think it varies. You can cube, I think, with as many people as you want, as many people as the cube will allow. Most cubes, the cube I'm designing is designed for eight people. Um, but I wanted to kind of get you guys' thoughts on some things. I'm kind of use you guys as guinea pigs, if that's okay. um,
Let's do it.
in talking about, like, my vision for my cube. Well, in fact, I have two visions. The first, I have always, some might know this, I've always had an affinity for the Valyrian draft packs, or the Valyrian draft set from second edition. I don't
Hmm.
know why. I really can't tell you why. I know that I love drafting. I love limited. It goes back to my time playing Magic, and I just really glommed on to the draft format in Thrones whenever there was a draft happening as a side event at Worlds, or any, or Thrones War, or whatever. I would for sure be interested in getting in playing if I could. And I was kind of a haphazard collector of the draft cards. I like to play them in Joust, in place of the much nicer printed cards if I could, because I'm weird. But my first vision for a cube was just using that set. So basically, having like a repeatable form of the Valyrian draft experience.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if anybody's done this, but if you have, and you have like a cube already built, and you have feelings or thoughts about the Valyrian draft cube, definitely hit me up on Facebook. I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on it. But right now, my vision for it is designed for 8 players, using all of the same rules as the Valyrian draft. So 40 card decks. You get to choose from 4 predetermined agendas that were designed specifically for Valyrian draft. And the cube itself will consist of one of every rare, because there were rarities to the cards in draft. I don't know if you guys knew that. Um,
Yep.
but yeah, so the cube would consist of one of every rare, 2 of every uncommon, and 3 of every common. So there's no perfect way to emulate the Valyrian draft experience other than to open the Valyrian draft packs. You know, technically speaking, you could, like, everybody could open a Put to the Sword. Even though it's highly unlikely, it's still possible. And there's no way to really emulate that randomness in a cube, but you can get pretty close, you know. So by doing that, I still feel like the strategies are largely similar. You know, the agendas are the same. Um, so that was my first vision for a cube, and I think that would be super fun. Turns out, don't know what I did with most of my Valyrian draft cards. I I put all my stuff in. I put like my whole life in storage like a year ago, and I went looking through it and found my Thrones cards, and sadly, like, didn't find any of the draft cards. Was really dejected and thought I had gotten rid of everything. And then the last place I looked, I know Alejandro, you were talking about how this happened to you too. The last place I looked had some, but not all. It basically had a stack of rares. I had saved all of my rare draft cards and some miscellaneous others, but it seems like I had not kept the rest of them. So this vision I had for this Valyrian draft cube, um, it was seeming like it wasn't going to be able to manifest. And so I started thinking about, you know, well, what would I do in its place? And that's how I got to this you know, second edition cube, where I'm just using cards from second edition. And it would be a more traditional cube, a singleton, where there's only one copy of any card in the cube. So you're not going to see any repeat cards. Um, and it's kind of like the Valyrian draft. I thought, well, you know, you have this problem of agendas. I mean, obviously, agendas are a huge part of Thrones, right? I mean, they really inform how we design and build decks, right? I mean, largely the agenda and the faction are the two biggest players in those
Agreed.
decisions.
Yep.
So that was the first thing I wanted to address. And my thought was, I will do what the designers did for the Valyrian draft set. I will design my own agendas that after the drafting process, everybody can choose which agenda they want to play. And everybody has access to all 7 agendas that I've designed. So I wanted to talk to you guys a bit about these agendas and kind of get your, just like, honestly, your gut takes on them. You know, are they broken? Are they bad? Are they just boring? Are they, you know, I want to know what you guys think. So I think I shared this document, but I can go ahead and just read what the agendas do, and then we can kind of talk about, you know, how we feel about them. How's that sound?
That's good to me.
So I thought it would be cool. I know that we just got plots that are all named after the 7 gods of Westeros, the 7 new gods. But I thought it would be cool to use those as sort of jumping off points, or like design, you know, inflection points for these agendas. So the 7 agendas that I designed are all named after one of the new gods, I guess they're called, right? One of the 7. So the first agenda is, and I'll add a link in our YouTube description, and probably our other, or just like the actual, like, episode description as well, so other people can read these. So the first one is the father. It says, during power challenges, raise the claim on each player's revealed kingdom or summer plot by 1 to a maximum of 2. And then it has a second line of text where it says, knight and king characters cost 1 less to marshal. Do we want to just go like one by one, or should we read them all off and then analyze them as a group?
let's just read them all off, and then we can just
We
overall.
I'm back now. It may be easier to do it one by one. Like,
I kind of think it might be easier to do them one by one too, Groth, if you don't mind.
Nope, sounds good to me.
sorry,
Okay,
Groth, like
so
it makes more sense. I had stepped away there for a second. It makes more sense
Yeah,
to
yeah,
wait, but I'm back. I'm back in time. Okay.
sounds good.
no worries. So did you? We're talking about the father.
Yep, I got it.
All right. Give me gut reactions. Let's start with Groth.
Um, Overall, I think this is fine. This would be no different than having a melee title that gives you extra power challenge or anything like that, and it's restricted. You got to have a kingdom or summer plot, which usually kingdoms are
I,
first, right? Your first plot, so going
right.
raising
Well,
a
and I
claim on
should
that
I should
isn't as
I should
dangerous.
add the context. I should
Uh,
add the sorry to interrupt you, but I should add the
You're
context
good.
that in this cube, um, I think what we're going to do is that you can play out of faction cards, but like in 1.0, they're just going to cost more gold.
One more,
Not
yeah,
exactly sure if it's going to be one or two. I'm thinking one, but I was going to float the idea of maybe loyal cards that are out of faction would cost two more, and non-loyal
yeah,
cards that are out of faction would cost one. But maybe
yeah,
that's too much to remember. I'm not entirely sure. So this is kind of like a workshop process.
yeah. No, I hear you. And then the second part, the knights and kings, that really works with kingdom and summer plots. So I like the synergy
Right.
there. So
Yeah.
overall, I think this is pretty solid.
Yeah. It's worth noting that this claim raise effect is happens on both sides. So your opponent will also get
They get
a
it too.
claim raise
Gotcha.
effect.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So
Yeah,
and
the
the
power.
go ahead.
Sorry, the power level seems pretty high. I guess we'll see what the
Mhm.
rest of them look like, but
Right.
that's my initial like,
Yeah.
it makes your things Oh, it makes all of them, not the first one. Oh my, this yeah, okay. This thing seems strong. That's quite a bit of economy.
Right.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it's
So the thought is in like the other draft sets, you'd have the knight agenda where you can play all out of
exactly,
faction knights. And
exactly.
so
Yeah.
the thought here was, well, if out of faction knights and kings cost one more, this it basically says you can play out of faction knights and kings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's
Yeah.
offsetting that additional gold or two that you'd have to spend. So
Well,
Yeah.
like you
um,
said, though, this is working for everyone, though. It's not just you, right? If I'm reading it correctly.
um, so it does say that, but I think maybe it should say that
Your
you,
night.
Marshall,
Okay.
yeah,
All right.
your knights and kings. I'm not sure. Um, I'll have to look at the because that seems like it could be kind of hectic.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
if two people are playing the father, then just everybody's knights and kings cost two less. Uh, so I'll have to
Are
look
you
at the.
restricting the agenda to one person, or is it going to be
No, so
several
everybody can
people?
choose because basically, like you do your draft and then you just choose which agenda makes the most sense
Gotcha.
for the draft you just did.
Okay.
So I think my intention was that the first line is universal. So like you can make a power challenge where the claim is two, but so can your opponent. So it's not like you're just the only one getting that advantage. But your deck is probably designed around winning power challenges more so than your opponent.
Uh,
So
yes.
And you
the
get to
idea
pick
is
your
that you
plots,
can
right? Knowing that you have that effect.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
No.
then the
When I
reduction is supposed to be specific to your deck and the way you
your deck,
designed it. So,
that makes sense. Yeah. No. When
so
I
that's a
ran
good
my
catch because I didn't notice that at
yeah
first.
when I ran my
Yeah, these.
cubes in Colorado Springs, the way I did it, I kind of went more general. I wanted like more of the card pool, like especially the bad cards. I went more like fun,
Mm,
general casual.
sure.
And what I did
Yeah,
is
and
I
that's
did
a
what you
yeah.
did with the eight, and then I used the Valerian cards, of course. And then, this was me testing it several times too to get it right, to see it works. And So I had them draft first, and then they kind of what they drafted off, they would pick their faction, and then they would pick their agenda. But I limited the agenda to one agenda, so you couldn't have multiple fathers or mothers. But that would be interesting now. Multiple people could have these agendas, which would be
Right.
chaotic for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah,
I just feel like the problem is that how do you determine who gets to draft the agenda first, and then like the person at the end, if their draft like didn't work out and it doesn't match the agenda they get stuck with, I just feel like that person's having a bad time. You
for
know what I
sure.
mean?
Yeah,
And so this just felt if I really just was copying what they did with the Valyrian draft pack
Valerian. Yeah,
in that you got to choose from a preset like couple agendas, and whichever
yeah.
one you can draft with them in mind. You can audible mid draft. You don't have to choose beforehand. None of that. Um, so yeah. And you'll see there is also some symmetry in these designs. We'll get into that a little bit later. And obviously, it's hard to talk about these without knowing what the card pool is, but just know that I'm considering traits and things of that nature in my selection of like the cards that are going to the cube. So like obviously, like um, and I should say similar to the Valyrian draft set, you'll have like a number of cards you're given before you draft that you can add to your deck, and that will likely be like some econ and some plots. Just that way, like if you don't draft a single plot, you still have a playable deck. You know, and the plot, the design is such that there are mostly all of these plot traits that we're going to talk about in these agendas. So um, there's a lot of them out there. So it should, these effects should happen frequently is the idea. So why don't we move on to the next one? Seems like you guys both thought the father was pretty strong. And I guess we can always go circle back if we think, if we want to reevaluate given like what we know now, I guess, if that makes sense. But for the second one is the mother. Reaction: when you win dominance, choose either military, intrigue, or power. Your opponent must satisfy the chosen claim as if you were the winning opponent. Kind of a bit of like a Maester Aemon feel, except for it doesn't matter if they made the challenge. It's just if you win dominance, it's a reward for winning dominance. And then another reaction: when you win dominance, draw one card. So that's like Tobo Mott's ability, just kind of like tacked on to an agenda. This is obviously designed with a specific, archetype in mind. But yeah, what are your guys' thoughts on this? Why don't we start with Alejandro first here?
Seems fine.
You can also compare it to the previous agenda too, because I guess that's the idea is that we want a somewhat balanced 7 agendas to choose from. Yeah, so if that's helpful at all.
I think I'm looking around a little bit. A lot of these have economy built into them, and this one doesn't. It does have this dominance thing. I don't know. I'm not super great about evaluating cards in a vacuum.
Sure.
So far these two they look real fun. Like I'd play in a format with some extra agendas in there. Yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah.
I think
Groth,
it
how about
looks.
you? What do you? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, sorry. I was just I think it looks a little bit weaker than the other ones, but
That's totally a fair evaluation, I think. Yeah.
yeah.
Groth, how about you?
I like it. It's got a claiming effect. 5 cost Aemon. And this is kind of forcing your opponent kind of to do challenges. So, your decks, it seems like a very defensive
Well,
agenda.
it's not quite Aemon in that it doesn't care if they've done the challenge. It more so wants them to sort of compete with you for dominance if they care
True.
about the trigger.
Yeah. Yeah. If they care.
It's
Yeah. So
the
I guess,
design
yeah.
was kind of thoughtful in that, like, a mother is sort of nurturing and defensive. So I was
Yep.
thinking like a defensive, passive sort of archetype. I
Definitely,
wanted an
that's
agenda
what I
that
was
kind of
thinking too.
rewarded that play style. You're right, though, Alejandro. It doesn't have an econ reduction, so it's going to be harder to play cards from out of faction in this with this agenda. That's totally true, and I think your baseline evaluation that this is probably a weaker agenda than the previous one is totally valid, and it probably means I need to make a slight adjustment to it to just increase the power level slightly.
Maybe
Um,
not, because there is quite an advantage to like not having to win challenges, right? Like you
right.
just keep all your
Mhm.
stuff standing and you get good things happen, right? So it
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you could just win dominance and claim power from your opponent every turn,
right.
and
Hmm.
draw an extra card.
Hmm.
And just you just have to contend with their challenges. So it could be more powerful. It's
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
a
that's what
fine
I'm saying.
line.
Like I'm
It's a
I'm
fine
I'm
line with
real
these kind of decks. Yeah.
I'm real bad at evaluating these things in a vacuum. I think
Hey, man, we're
these
all in
two
the
look
same boat.
awesome. Yeah, like
Awesome. That's great. Yeah, I'm glad you think so. Um, okay, well, let's move along. The next one is the warrior. This one, there's some symmetry between this one and the father. During military challenges, raise the claim on each player's revealed war or winter plot by one to a maximum of two. And then the second line is your wildling and army characters cost one less to marshal. I should also, I'm not sure if I should say one less to marshal or come out of shadows or just leave it at marshal, but that's, again, kind of picking nits a little bit and something that could be adjusted down the road. But so this is a very symmetrical agenda to the father, except for it cares about military challenges and the traits of the reduced characters are typically they care more about military icons. So um, yeah, what do you guys think? I mean, do you think that this is like I mean and do you think the military having a two claim military challenge seems like it's probably maybe inherently a little bit more powerful than a two claim power challenge? Um,
oh yeah,
yeah, how do you guys feel about
Yeah,
this
this
one?
this is sweet. I'm
yeah,
playing
very
Drogo in
early
this
on.
deck.
You're
Yeah,
playing, yeah. You're playing. You're Alejandro's in for Targ Warrior.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Heck yeah.
yeah. This is definitely an
Um,
early on agenda.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was
So
saying with the other one, the father. Like, who cares? Because, like you said, Kingdom or Summer plots. Okay, Summer plots, I could see you playing mid, but Kingdom's always your first plot. But there's no power in the
mhm,
beginning of the game, so you're not
right.
really using that
So
agenda. Where the
actually one
warrior
of
is
the
definitely a higher. So
yeah. So actually, we can talk a little bit about the plots. I will share this. Uh, well, I opened the wrong Google Sheet, but I will share this Google Sheet with you guys. So I have at least the first draft of the plots selected. Um, I'll drop that in here. But basically, yeah. So some of the summer plots include, like tourney for the hand. Some rushy style plots. They are all the way at the bottom on line 409. But we've got uh, Valor Morgulis, March to the Wall, Holding the Trident is a draft only plot. Palace of Sorrows, Barring the Gates. So the summer plots are Exchange of Information, Tourney for the King, Gathering Storm, and Feast or Famine, which is a draft only plot. As well as there probably will be one summer plot in the plots that you're given before you draft, as well as one kingdom plot. So, and then the kingdom plots are Littlefinger's Meddling, Loan from the Iron Bank, For the Realm, and King in the North. Now, obviously, you have to draft these plots in order to have them. So there's
yeah,
no guarantee you're going to get all of them. But there are four of every relevant trait. And that's not including the faction specific plots, which there are one of each of the series. And those all have relevant traits here as well. So I definitely think that there's a good chance that this warrior agenda is the strongest of the three, and we'll see the third one later. But yeah, I did a lot of choosing of plots with traits in mind. So
Yeah, I would say
um,
this is the strongest so far. I would definitely put this up there.
I think I agree with that. Yeah. Okay, so moving on, we've got the Smith. Reaction after an attachment or location enters play under your control, gain 1 gold. And reaction after an attachment or location leaves play, draw 1 gold. I may have lost you guys audio
Wait,
wise.
I'll be
Oh,
back.
no,
I'll be
I
back.
got you.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Okay,
got
we're
you.
back. All right, so sorry. The last thing I just asked, I read off the maiden or the Smith. Did you guys hear me read that?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So yeah, what were our reactions to that? How do we feel about that?
I like
The-
the added location because I find attachments
Mhm.
in this kind of setting
Wasn't
a
enough.
little.
Yeah.
It's kind of tough in this setting
Right.
with
Yep.
attachments when you're doing multiplayer.
It's
Yep.
probably pretty good. It probably is difficult for this to be up to par in limited format because characters kind of dominate that format,
Exactly. Yeah.
um, but it looks
It's
sweet. Like,
Yeah, it's when you consider there are some really powerful location engines and attachment engines in the cube. I guess it's kind of slated towards those. I mean, we're talking like things I do for love. King's Landing. I don't know if you guys remember that card.
Yep.
So basically, like anytime you play, if you play that in this agenda, anytime you play a location, you're gaining a gold and drawing a card, right?
Hard. Yeah.
At least for the
Exactly.
first three. Um, so
Yeah.
I think this is one of those ones that like it definitely is going to vary. I think on how strong of a deck you draft, and how many locations you get. The fact that all of the limited location packages that you get before you draft include 3 Kings Roads definitely helps the location leaves play effect to matter,
oh
at
boy,
least
yeah. I mean that.
somewhat.
Yeah, that seems probably
So
pretty strong. Yeah.
right, this seems like one of those where like maybe it doesn't look really strong right now, but it could easily be the strongest, and it might need to be nerfed. So,
Yeah.
um, okay, cool.
It
After
definitely looks the more or the one of the weaker ones, but yeah, this is definitely gonna when you give us feedback, you're gonna definitely see if it's the
right,
strongest.
right. So the next
I've
we've got.
definitely
Oh, good.
I was just gonna say I would definitely, as of right now, like Alejandro said, it's tough to say in a vacuum, but I'd be on the warrior, uh,
Hmm.
probably right off the
Yeah,
bat, or even
yeah. I
the
mean,
father.
if you can get the
But they,
plot traits to line up,
yeah,
it definitely
yeah.
seems strong.
But I mean, we know one goal, one card, and drawing one card is very strong. So let's see.
Absolutely, as we've seen with Valyrian Steel.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, the next one is the Maiden. This is an interesting one. While you control less characters than your opponent, characters you marshal cost 2 gold less. I'm probably not wording that exactly as it should be, but I think you guys get the gist.
Yep.
Yeah.
The second line is while you control less locations than your opponent, locations you marshal cost 1 gold less. This is a tough one to evaluate, I think. I will note that CT, of all 7 of these, CT said this was the one he was the most intrigued by.
Yeah, I'm definitely intrigued because I'm like, is this a this is definitely a play behind an agenda. And are you
Right.
resetting first, or how do you?
Mhm.
Because if you reset, then guess what? Now this gets turned off too. So that's what.
Right.
I guess you wait, you buy your time, then reset, and then you take off. I'm not. This is wild,
Yeah,
especially
definitely a tough
in
one
the
to
format.
evaluate.
Yeah, in the format you're talking about, this is very hard to to evaluate.
Yeah. I think it's kind of one of those things where it should, like, in theory it should keep you at least on your opponent's heels, but it's not necessarily going to propel you past them.
Past them. Yeah.
So it's kind of it seems like it's maybe a forgiving agenda. Like, you know,
Sorry you
oh,
drew
maybe
those bad 7 cards. Sorry you got mulligans.
yeah,
You know, like,
or maybe like I had to audible mid draft and I didn't
yeah,
get all of the draft god cards I thought I was going to, and now I'm playing like just I'm like Lannister good stuff, or
yeah,
something like that.
yeah.
Um,
This sounds like my
so
agenda. Maybe this is for
yeah,
me, where I like just mulligan into a bad hand. I'm like, oh, at least I have this to save me.
I will also say it's probably also the most combo-y agenda.
All right, yeah,
Um, because if you're doing something where you're recurring a character over and over again or something like that,
yeah,
and you just always are going to have less characters than your opponent, it's definitely something that I think could be abused.
Yeah, it also
yeah,
really rewards initiative. Like if you can get your opponent
Mm-hmm.
going first every turn, your stuff is just
Mm-hmm.
like it's just a lot of money
Your
on the
stuff is
agenda.
cheaper. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, for
Goes
sure.
farther.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it turns all those like 4-7-1, 4-8-1 plots into 6-7-8-1 plots.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that's true.
I
Very
think it could
true.
be sneaky good. So, um,
Yeah.
okay, the next one is the Crone. Um, During intrigue challenges, you guys probably know where this is going. Raise the claim on each player's revealed scheme or omen plot by 1 to a maximum of 2, and your characters cost 1 less to bring out of shadows or ambush. So instead of having
Lannister.
like a yeah, so instead of having a specific trait that they reduce, they're reducing all characters that you
Yeah,
ambush or or bring out of shadows.
Yeah,
shadows. Yeah,
keyworded characters. Yeah, sweet.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
I mean, I think my assumption is this is probably the least powerful of the three, just because I feel like intrigue challenges are often the least important
Agreed.
in like the whole like scheme of things. Um, Obviously very important still, and you can definitely lose a game by running out of cards in hand. But um, yeah, I mean, I think hopefully the power level is close enough to the other two that it's interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would say this is the weakest.
it is made super interesting by the fact that uh, the shadows keyword is being propped up here,
Mm,
and the omen keyword is being propped up. So if you can get some resets, like
Yeah, mm,
you're probably
absolutely.
eyeing this thing
Yeah,
if you can get away with it.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, this is definitely a home for like the shadows and sort of jumpy
yeah,
ambushy decks, and um, it's not quite like a Kingdoms of Shadows agenda, of old, but I wanted a home for those archetypes, and this seemed like a decent place to put them. And I also needed to finish off my sort of my trifecta of
yeah.
claim raising effects.
Flame
So,
race. Yeah,
but yeah, we claim one on Valor, claim one on Intrigue on Valors now. So, or Valor Morgulus, that is. So,
yeah,
there are other there are other surprisingly good omens. At the Palace of Sorrows is an omen. The Gathering Storm. Yeah, consider too that in this cube I'm going to be using things I do for love, just because I want this to be a relatively high power level cube.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
Gathering Storm is like a kind of a broken card, and it's
broken
Omen
card.
and Summer, so
Yeah,
it's two relevant traits.
yeah. 6/8, six
And
eight two,
then
pretty good.
mhm, First Snow of Winter, also an Omen.
Yep,
You know, so and then obviously
good for jumping.
Valor. So
Yeah,
yeah,
first no good for jumping characters.
yep,
Yeah, I would just say
exactly.
that I found the same thing. As much I love Intrigue Challenge, and I've tried to build decks around winning it. Even just gassing someone's hand. Sometimes in Thrones, they draw the next two cards that are the right ones, and
That's kind of the
just
problem with attacking the hand in Thrones is unlike a lot of card games where you only draw a single card per turn.
yep,
In Thrones you draw like, 100% more cards than other card
yep,
games every turn. So that's
yep.
just you have to be doing like twice. You got to be doing double duty.
Double
And
duty.
like
Yep.
you said, like if they just draw two relevant cards, like that's oftentimes enough to. So you got to be affecting the board in other ways as well. So
Exactly. Yep.
I think this is the one I have the most skeptical of out of the gate, but at the same time, we've definitely seen Shadows decks be very powerful and abused. So I guess
I,
approach it with caution. I approach it with caution. So
I mean, if I was
um,
playing, I would pick this one though. This speaks to me the most, even though I know in the
yeah,
end you
yeah,
you just can't win off an intrigue. Unfortunately, you have to play
right,
the
right,
power game as well. Like you said, you got to do double duty,
mhm,
intrigue and power. Well, I'd
yeah.
pick it.
I also was careful to you know to choose characters and not cards cost one
Cards.
less.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Smart.
yeah.
Yeah.
And finally, we round it out with the stranger, perhaps the strangest of all the agendas here, fittingly. Um, During setup, cards cost one additional gold for you. So during your setup, I'm not really sure how that should say, but I'll figure it out. So during your setup, cards cost one additional gold. Draw phase action. I don't know how many draw phase actions we have in the game, but I was just like, probably not enough, so I'm going to make one. Draw phase action. Kill one character you control. Discard one card from your hand and move one power from your house card to your opponent's house card to reveal a new plot card from your plot deck.
Nice.
Well, that's an effect.
Yep.
That is an effect.
Oh my.
Yeah. I mean, you can't use it on turn 0 or turn 1, right? Because who has power on their house card in the draw phase of turn 1?
Yeah, and you have to have all three. You got to be able to do all three to trigger this.
Got
So
to be able to
this is
do all
definitely a
three.
wheels within wheels type of card, which I like.
Right. Which, I mean, Wheels Within Wheels is going to be in this cube.
It is going to be
Tipsy
in the queue.
Bird
Yep.
is going to be in this cube. Yeah. So there's definitely going to be some plot manipulation in this cube. And I guess the question is the price too high or is it not high enough?
I
Because
think the setup.
it's obviously a very
Yeah,
powerful effect, and you're going to be gimped somewhat on your setup having only, well, it's not exactly having only 4 gold, but it's sort of like a house HRD situation, except for you don't get the location. So,
yeah.
um,
I think it was smart to do the draw phase too because you didn't collect the gold on your plot. Then you switch your plot. So
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, I think the cost one additional for setup is too punishing. That's just my opinion though. But I think the draw phase action is perfect. Do all three of those to change a plot.
This should also be limit one per round. So
Rounds, yeah. Yeah.
I don't think you should be able to do this twice. If, like, say you could, you know.
Yeah. If you could, yeah.
Yeah, Alejandro. Other than saying this is an agenda or a card, rather, I'm curious to hear what you have to say about this.
Yeah, I mean, it looks super fun. I agree with Groth that this setup is probably too limiting. Like that
Mm.
is
Like, do you
that
think the cost of killing a character, discarding a card, and losing a power is enough of a cost that I don't need, it doesn't need to have the setup drawback?
probably but I guess I don't know like all the plots. Hold on, let me take a look. There's plots here.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And I mean, these are subject to
I
change,
I
but
think I think
so
it's
far that's
probably
what we got.
fine. I would. I mean, I'd err on the side of putting this in, and then you kind of let the games figure out if you shouldn't have done that. But um, there's gonna be less plots to abuse in this format, so I would roll with it for sure.
Yeah.
You don't
There's
have
also
naval
like,
in, right? There's no
what's that?
naval. You don't have naval.
Um, there
It's
is
not a,
not a naval right now,
yeah.
although,
It
like I
probably
said,
should be.
the plots are certainly up for. They're not set in stone. I'm trying to. In fact, I think the problem with naval was that it's not relevantly traded. Is it war traded or is it?
It's war, I
Um,
believe.
is it or is it just
Let me
siege?
check. It might be siege though. Let me check. I
It's
got it
siege
It's
right here
war.
for you.
war.
No,
Yeah.
it's siege
It's
war. That
war.
could
It's war.
be.
Yeah.
It should probably be in the cube. Let's just say that much,
See,
especially with
I,
wheels within wheels and Trixie Bird. It should
yeah.
probably be in the cube. So
So the
I'll
first
add
thing I'm
that. Yeah.
yeah, the first thing I'm thinking is Val Magulis, but then I'm like, are you willing to trade that plot you just picked? Because you're wasting that
Well,
plot, that you just picked.
I think the idea is you valor and then you draw phase into something with claim and economy.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what I'm wondering. Like, you could do it either way, right? You could either see, well, I'll waste this plot and see
Yeah.
what they do, and then if they played a plot that is good for you to change to valor, or vice versa. But then that's what I'm thinking about naval. This works really well with naval, and I
Right.
think that's to your
It's
cost
really
question. I think this is
yeah
worth it. Kill a person, discard one card, and lose a power. I think is worth to play that
to do
naval
that
plot.
effect.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think
so
I think that.
you guys think let
It's
people
also
have go ahead.
Yeah,
absolutely, yeah. It's also not doing anything turn one because you don't have a power.
Mhm. Exactly. You
exactly.
cannot
Yeah,
do this on turn one. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and so you have to be like you have to get power before you can even take advantage of this. Yeah, let
Okay.
the play set up cards. Let
All
them
right.
have
yeah,
Okay.
fun.
Okay. Okay. All
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I'd find something else. If you can find something else,
we're
you know.
we're gonna regret this.
Well, maybe
Yeah,
I
maybe
mean,
like maybe like limit their hand, like they can only draw 6 cards, or something like that. Or maybe
yeah.
after setup on the refill, they have to start at like 5 cards, or I don't know. You could always do
Ask
that.
for forgiveness, not for permission, right? You know.
hmm
I agree.
I
Yes,
mean,
never ask for
I
permission
can
first. Ask for
I can
forgiveness later.
I'll just put it out there and and just see if somebody breaks it when we in the
Yeah, that
first
would be fun.
cube draft.
That'd be fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
the fact that you can't use it on turn one, as far as I'm aware, there's no way to have like I don't think there's a plot. Not and obviously I have control over which plots are in the cube.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, um,
I
yeah,
mean,
I think
Heads
it's
on Spice would
really
be the only
interesting.
one. Heads on Spice would be the
It's
only one, and that's
Oh, heads
random.
on spikes, yeah. And I don't currently have heads on spikes in the cube. Not to say that I shouldn't necessarily. It's not really one of my favorites, and I don't know that it is a war plot. So again,
It's a war plot. Yeah,
if it's a war omen summer winter scheme whatever the kingdom, like I'm considering it, so um, there will be a couple plots that aren't those. In fact, on the list, there are a few that I just don't even mention the traits because the traits aren't relevant. I think there's two of them. And I think I'm going to add, um, I think I'm going to add a few more plots anyway, because I want people to be able to draft like a plot or two. That's kind of the idea. Is like everybody
Exactly.
gets
Yeah.
to draft like one or two plots that they can modify their plot line so that not everybody's playing the same 4 or 5 plots in their 5 card plot line.
Hmm.
So
Drafting plots is the best. That's the
Yeah.
funnest
yeah,
thing.
yeah. This is
No,
also where
I need
it's
another
worth
downside.
noting
I would
that.
say.
Okay, I'll start without a downside, and we'll see where it goes. I might also proof this through a couple other people and just get gut reactions because I'm interested. But it's worth noting that the cube will play 40 card decks, 5 card plot decks. Not sure if we're playing to 10 power or 15. Kind of curious what you guys is now that you've seen these agendas, what you're feeling on that is. I believe the draft was to 10 power. Uh, Not 100% on that. It's been quite a
If
few
the
years
power
since I
level is going to
played.
be high, you probably want the power. You probably want to be
15.
You
playing at
probably want
15.
You
15.
want to play
That's my
15.
that's my gut. My gut is
Yeah.
play to 15, keep the other two things, keep the 40 card decks, keep the 5 card plot decks.
You probably
Um,
need to test that because it probably changes how often people are decking out before they win.
yeah, and you know me, I've included a couple. I've included a couple ways to mill people out. So because just that seems like stupid and fun to have in a cube. You got to have weird win conditions in cubes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you bet your Bippy Queen's Retinue and whatever that stupid Shadows attachment is are definitely in the cube. So
Yeah.
Oh boy.
oh boy. Plus, I don't know if you remember, but there's a
Is
things
that
we do
Colt
for love
music?
event. What's it?
Is that Colt right here?
Yeah, yeah. I think a wild colt must appear.
Yeah.
It's like saying Candyman in the mirror.
Yeah.
You say mill, you say Queen's Retinue, and you forget attachment name. That's what's preventing Colt from haunting me is that I don't know
I'm
the
coming back.
attachment's name, so I can't
Yeah.
say it. But um, yeah, yeah. I don't know if you remember, but things we do for love. There's an event that mills two
Unexpected
for every
guile.
card in dead pile.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
that's the name of the. Okay, Colt. There he
Unexpected.
is. Hey, hi, Colt. No,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
So no,
no,
for sure.
this is another reason play cube is you get to play those cards again. All those broken
Yeah,
cards.
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just
That's the fun part.
it's designing a cube is so much fun because I get to think like what are some weird cards that would never normally be able to interact with each other because they're loyal that people
Yep.
could actually play together in this format, you know?
Exactly.
And I'll never think of all of them, but people will figure them out on their own as they draft and play and um so yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for the event, and I appreciate your guys' input on these. Um, before we close out this section, I'm curious to know you've heard all seven. Which one are you guys? Which one are you guys gravitating towards as being the most objectively powerful? Groth, you
I'll
first.
still say I'll still say warrior.
Cool.
So
Alejandro.
I mean the stranger definitely could be top, but I'll say warrior for
Yeah.
now. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm definitely playing the Cal Drogo like agenda. I mean, but
All
more,
right.
more
So that means I got to be nerfing that shit. That's what I'm hearing right
that's bullshit.
here.
That is the father. The father.
It's just because of early on games, the earlier
Yeah,
start is what really. I mean, you guys talked about it. Look
for
what
sure.
Sea of Blood,
Yeah,
Sea of Blood
yeah,
Tarn did to the
yeah,
game at the end of it. So
absolutely. Yeah, no, and I could see that being really, really challenging. So it's, you know, uh,
the
everybody who
only
plays in
worst
the
thing you
first
could have
cube, they're going
done
to be
is
little
put
guinea
choke
pigs.
in. If you put choke in here, that'd be the only worst worst agenda.
I was kind of planning on it, but I was kind of hoping to represent major like archetypes if possible, but there's only so much room in the cube,
No, I
so
hear you. Yeah.
so we will see. But sweet. Well, thanks for giving me your guys' input on that, and hopefully that was enjoyable for the listeners. Like I said, we will definitely link these agendas, and hopefully by the time we release this, maybe even a cube list. We'll see. That's a definite maybe, but Yeah, so
Wait, how
I'll
long
be
are we gonna wait to
scheduling
release this?
a couple days, maybe a day. I don't know. I'm almost done with my list. It's I've got
Okay.
individual faction lists on Drones DB. I haven't put them up on the spreadsheet with like hyperlinks and stuff. That's the only.
And we're back, and now begins hour 3 of the
Oh
Return
boy,
podcast.
this is a thick boy. Yeah, the thickest of boys. Well, it's a good thing we're wrapping things up. It's now 2:41 in the morning. Thank you, Groth and Alejandro, for being up this late with
No
me.
problem. My pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, definitely had a lot of fun talking to you guys, and hopefully, it's not another 3 years between our now and our next episode.
But who knows?
But who knows? You never know what's going to happen. So, um, yeah. Any closing thoughts before we get out of here?
Are we gonna? Are we gonna? When are we thinking for the next episode? I guess we don't have to close.
But yeah, the people gotta people we don't the people we don't have to divulge that information
Yeah, maybe
publicly.
not. I guess that's fine. That's fine.
Just
I, I
keep an eye out for
listen.
future Thrones
I
content.
teased it earlier, and I'm just so excited.
That's Oh boy, I don't know if I'm ready for that, dude. Oh, man. I mean, you
You
gotta.
don't have to be on it, my dude.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I mean, I feel like I kind of have to
Uh,
be though.
oh
But
yeah, I
yeah.
think so.
Yeah. I think we talked about doing some like build a deck, play a deck, and analysis content. I floated the idea of doing some like live game analysis potentially. Yeah, maybe look for, I don't know, pie in the sky, some varied styles of future content from Zero Reserve. But yeah, I'm definitely ready to go to bed. So thank you,
Yeah.
everybody, for listening. Um, and yeah, have a good night.
Later. Good night.
Peace.